Welcome. My name is Dot Porter. I'm the curator for digital research services in the Kislak Center for Special Collections, Rare Books and Manuscripts of the University of Pennsylvania Libraries. I split my time with the Schoenberg Institute for Manuscript Studies, which is a sort of research and development group in the Kislak Center that focuses on manuscript studies, both our physical collections, but also we do a lot of digital work. And as my title implies, I work a lot on digital projects and digitization projects, but one of my favorite things to do is outreach with the physical collections, including Coffee with a Codex. And as you know, on Wednesdays this year at noon, for 30 minutes, we bring one or sometimes two. Today we have two of our manuscripts, and I will show them to you and talk to you about them a little bit. Oftentimes, these are not manuscripts that I have looked at before. I do not consider myself to be an expert. And today in particular, this is very interesting because what I have are two Hebrew manuscripts. I've never studied Hebrew. I have studied Latin, although I wouldn't say that I'm an expert on Latin. But Hebrew manuscripts are things that I have seen because we have them in our collections. But I did a fair bit more research this week than I tend to do. And I still don't feel expert level, but I think that these are really interesting books. And I hope that we all learn something here. And as always, if there are people in the call who know more than I do about these manuscripts in particular, or about Jewish life in Italy, which is sort of a big part of what these manuscripts represent, please don't hesitate to drop comments in the chat or questions. My colleague Amy Hutchins, who is our manuscripts cataloging librarian, she's here too, and we will keep our eye on the chat and we'll answer any kind of questions that might come along as well as we can, given that neither of us, I think, are really expert in Hebrew. No, Amy's shaking her head too. So I want to go ahead and get started. So the first one that I want to look at is the shelf mark is LJS 70. And this is a collection of medical recipes, folk remedies, charms, and spells. And it includes at the start of the manuscript a translation into Hebrew of a Latin text by, I was just looking at his name, Johannes de Palma, who wrote in circa 1250 a medical treatise called Practica. It's very short. It only takes up 8 folios in the manuscript. So the manuscript, it was written in Siena, Italy, so sort of in the middle of Italy, in 1533. And we know the exact date that it was written because it actually contains 3 separate colophons, all by the same scribe. So it was written by a single scribe, but he wrote 3 separate colophons when he wrote it. And I'll say a little bit more about that in a minute. The binding is a contemporary binding, which means that it's dated to about the same time that the manuscript was written. Whether it's the original binding, I don't know. It could be the original binding, or it could be that it was rebound at some time close to the time that it was actually written. So it's a nice kind of leather binding. It's over not wooden boards, but sort of paper boards. But it's got this really nice embossed decoration with the Star of David and a kind of decoration here. There are a few, thinking about the provenance, there are some stamps. Here we have our own LJS. It was part of this collection, Provenance. So it was owned by an Italian philologist, poet, and biblical exegete, Samuel David Luzzatto. It was acquired by a Polish scholar from his estate. And this is the label that you see here. So he's the person who acquired it from this other person. It was sold as part of that library to Judith Montefiore College in England after 1887. So now we're in the mid 19th century. It was placed on deposit at Jews College in London as part of an endowment in 1899, sold at auction in Sotheby's in 2004 to Lawrence Schoenberg. And so that's the person who gave it to us. And then it was gifted to us in 2015. So that's sort of the long trajectory of this book coming from Italy into the Penn collection via Lawrence Schoenberg there. So I mentioned that we know that this was written in 1533 because there are multiple colophons. There's a colophon, and unfortunately, I can show you the pages, but because I don't read Hebrew, I can't actually point out where the colophons are on the page. But according to the record, there is a colophon on 10 recto, which is here. And then there's another one on 18 verso. You see the numbers have been added later. And here we have 17 and 18 verso. So there's a second colophon here. And both of these colophons were written in January of 1533. The only sort of identified text in this manuscript, interestingly, and I honestly don't know if this is purposeful or not, but from 10 to 18 in the manuscript is this translation into Hebrew of the Johannes de Palma's text. So it seems like it could be between these two colophons. January 1533 there. And then the rest of the manuscript is recipes and charms and other things, including, if we look here, now most of the manuscript is written in an Italian cursive script, Hebrew Italian cursive script here. But if you look in the middle of the page here, you will notice that this is not Hebrew, this is Italian. And so there are a few places where the verb, maybe what he was copying, maybe he was copying from several different sources, because this text hasn't really been identified. It's sort of hard to say how he compiled it, but there are a few places where there's Italian there. So someone in the chat has asked about gloves. So current best practice is clean, dry hands. So I never wear gloves. We never wear gloves because it's actually, you can't, if you're wearing gloves, you can't feel the material and you might accidentally handle it more roughly than you mean to. And it's also dirty. So clean, dry hands. Let's see, Carol asks, is the Italian writing in the same hand? I'm kind of assuming that the same scribe wrote it, but because the alphabets are so different, it's hard for me. I don't know, Amy, do you have any insight into that?
No, I was going to say that even in like between German and Latin, when those are mixed in a text, when you have character sets that are so different, it's really difficult to tell whether you have two scribes or one scribe working in two languages.
Yeah. So I don't know. From what I've read, so in the links that I posted, I read a bit. There's an article about sort of well, both of them are about sort of Jewish culture in Italy at this time. So by the sort of 15th into the 16th century, the Jewish people had been mostly pushed out of other parts of Europe. And so Italy was one place where they were able to live and flourish. And it sounds like there was a great sort of manuscript culture at this time, including a lot of medicine. And also a bit of magic, which I don't know much about, but it seems like magic, Jewish magic is sort of its own thing. And so it wouldn't surprise me that the scribe probably spoke Italian and Hebrew, and it wouldn't surprise me if he wrote in both. And so, and it seems pretty, reading, it doesn't look like it was left blank and then filled in. It looks like to me that it's well spaced, as though he's sort of writing down and then he gets to one that's Italian and then he writes down. I could be wrong though, because as I say, I'm not an expert in this. So this is still early on in the manuscript. So we get to 29 and 36. And the third, I'm going to skip ahead. The third colophon is quite a bit further towards the end of the manuscript, is folio 90. So here we have, oh, sorry, I'm quite close. Here we have 90, and am I not pinned? I didn't spotlight. There we go, sorry, now we're spotlighted. 90, and so this is the third colophon. The third colophon, the date is December of 1533. So the ones at the beginning of the manuscript were January of 1533, and now we have December of 1533 at the end. Which before I saw that, I realized that I don't really think about the time that, I don't know if you guys do, but I don't really think about the time that it takes to write a manuscript and how long it might take to copy something out. But in this case, we have a really good idea of how long it took him, because we have January at the front and then December towards the back. So this is not a very long, as manuscripts go, it's not hugely long. That's not very, there we go. This is 90 folios. I don't think he was sitting down and writing for long periods of time every day. Maybe he was, because it seems like you could get through more than 90 folios in that time span. But maybe so. Here we go. So I thought that was interesting. There are also, they're not mentioned in the record, so I'm not really sure, but there appear to be some marginal notes of some kind. And when you see, usually when we see marginal notes, when we're looking through the manuscripts, it means it's a sign that the book was used. So somebody was reading through the book and thought it important to make a note at some point. Probably not, these don't look to me to be, I think that one is the same scribe, and I think these look different to my eye. There are margins, the margins are pretty large, which implies a lot of times that they were left open with the maybe the assumption, or at least allowing future readers to come in and leave their own marks. Although in this case, there aren't actually a large number of them. So the scribe, Abraham ben Mushulam of St. Angelo, he was very well known. He copied or wrote over 30 manuscripts that survive. So he was pretty well known, and he has a really nice, even though I can't read Hebrew, I can tell that this is a nice hand. And we can compare it with the second one, an Arabic letter. Oh, you may have, let's see. Let me see if I can find, I wouldn't be surprised to see Arabic in the, here are the, this is the page that I was looking at. I don't know if there's Arabic, Arabic there. But it might be worth going back and looking through the digital copy, because that'll be easier to see than there on the right of the other page. Let's see. Here, maybe. And then there's also, I think that's something in Latin script there. Maybe titles toward the margin. So yeah, I think that what what Bran is pointing out is over here, every entry has sort of a note at the front here, so you can see when they're, even not knowing Hebrew, I can pretty much guess that this is where each one is starting, and there's an enormous number. So I want to switch to the next manuscript, and I'm glad that I decided to pull both of them, because I feel like this one is an interesting sort of contrast, and I think that they were bought at the same time, because that was 470 and this is 471. 471, this is a little bit earlier. So this was written also in Italy, although not further identified other than just being in Italy. It says 14th through 15th century. So we don't know who the scribe was. There's no colophon. We don't have a date, but sort of 14th, 15th century. The text is and it's another, if you remember, the Provenance is similar. It came through the same collection here and then was purchased by Mr. Schoenberg at the same time. So this is a medical collection, but similar in format in a few ways. So the binding is modern. This is what the catalog describes it as a modern Buckram binding. So this is the same kind of binding that you would find on mid-20th century library books, right? Like they're really common. But when you open it up, this is probably the original binding here. So it's just been sort of stuck in this modern binding. This is a parchment binding. And then we open up the covers and we get all kinds of notes. So this is a lot messier than 470. This manuscript has been used a lot more. There's a lot more sort of going on here. So we have I think their recipes, medical prescriptions have been sort of added later. So these are later editions. Here we have a library stamp. Here somebody's written 406, so I guess that was probably an earlier shelf mark. Let's see, some interesting things about this. It is a combination of, the material is a combination of parchment and paper. So the cover is parchment. And then the first page we have here is parchment. And then we get paper. It's a little bit, there's some water damage here and it's been repaired a little bit. And the first text that we find is, all of these texts have been identified. So the first 53 folios, and this one, it's the only known copy of a Hebrew translation of Gentilius de Foligno's medical manual, which includes 592 prescriptions. So similar to the previous manuscript, each one of these sort of entries is a different prescription. They're sort of saying, okay, if you have this illness, here's what you can do. And I read a little bit about this work, which was originally written in Latin, and there's a lot of what you'd expect. So there's things about how you bleed. He was very interested in humors, but apparently he also did a lot of his own sort of practical investigations too. So it's sort of a combination of practical, his own knowledge, but also the sort of accepted knowledge of the four humors, and here's how you keep your humors in check and these kinds of things. So going through here, and then suddenly we have another parchment, another piece of parchment. So we've had paper and now we have parchment. And what has been, and we're in the middle of a choir. I'm probably the only person who cares about this, but I always check this out. So there's thread, you probably can't see it and I don't want to pull, but there's thread here. So we're in the middle of a choir. This is sheets that have been folded up and then bound together to make the book. And to strengthen, because this paper is actually not, it's sort of, you can see here, it's kind of fragile. And so what they've done is written sheets of parchment and put them on the inside and the outside of each choir. So as you go through, you're going to see more parchment leaves interspersed. And that's because they were put there to keep it from falling apart, basically. So it's something that is not very unusual. It's not unheard of, but it's still unusual enough that I think it's pretty cool to see it in action. And here, something that we see a lot in Latin manuscripts, this is a catchword here. So we're at the end of the choir. There's a catchword. It's partially covered up by this thing in the margin, but catchwords help to tell the binder what order to put the choirs in so they don't get bound out of order. So this first text is this translation of Defoglio. I'm probably saying his name wrong. And this one also, aside from the notes, that is the added prescriptions on the front and back that we saw, there aren't actually a lot of notes, although it's messy and dirty, which, well, here's one. Here's a note down here in the margin. Enough that it seems like it may have been used quite a bit. All right, so our next text is another 14th century medical text, but this is only through folio 68. Another thing that I found sort of interesting as I was paging through, if you're looking at a book that has multiple texts in it, it can be interesting to notice if the texts correspond with the physical structure. So choirs that are made of sheets that are folded, if each text is enclosed in a choir and you don't have two texts in sort of starting in a choir and going to the next one, it tells you that the choirs could have been written separately and then bound together. In this case, we have texts that end and then start, the next one starts in the middle of the choir. And so here, 53, this is where the text is ending on 53. And then the next one, we can see there's a header here, the heading. The next one starts here. This is sort of in the middle of a choir. So it was being written straight through. So whoever was writing this, probably had these texts in mind, and he's like, okay, I'm going to write this translation that I have of Defoglio. I'm going to then do Dino de Garbo, this other translation that I have here. So we come through here. When I was doing my bit of research, I was interested to discover that I was like, why medical? Like, why are there these medical texts in Hebrew in Italy? And it's because most of the other universities in Europe, I already mentioned that the Jewish people had been pushed out. They also couldn't go to university to study medicine. Medicine was one of the things that people would go to universities to study, except for the ones in Italy. So there were a lot of Jewish people studying medicine in Italian universities. And so they were copying the texts of the time that you would be expected to know, and translating them into Hebrew. So we have, these are all three of these are known 14th century Latin medical texts translated into Hebrew, copied presumably for students who were studying them in university. All right, so through, and I don't, some sorts of lists. I don't know enough about this text to know what exactly is going on here, but lists of instructions maybe, or contents. This is where we're starting, yes, 69, we have a new text starting here. This is interesting. Just thinking about the transfer of knowledge. This is a Hebrew translation of Bernard Alberti's Introductio in Practicam Medicum, which was itself compiled by the fourth book of Avicenna's canon. And we've talked about Avicenna. We've looked at translations into Latin of Avicenna, who wrote in Arabic before. So Avicenna had this sort of 5-book medical text that was hugely influential in Europe throughout the Middle Ages. And so here we have another sort of another step away. So we had some person in Latin compiled some things from one of Avicenna's books, and now it's been translated into Hebrew in Italy. And here we have it in this manuscript. So that's pretty cool, I think. And I think this is not the same scribe. My record doesn't say anything about how many scribes there are here, but this looks much smaller. This writing looks smaller than the other one. So there's this one, and this looks different. The paper looks different as well. And I think that this text is starting on a new choir. I could be wrong about that. I haven't looked at this too carefully, but that would be sort of interesting, because if it had a different scribe and it's on a different choir, it could have been added at another time. But it still has this parchment. It still has the parchment paper. So I don't know. I like the ruling too. If you can see, it's got this pencil ruling, so they kept it nice and straight. Oh no, a little bit of water damage there. This book has been through some stuff, I guess. There we go. And here we have some marginal notes. So here are some places that were added, although that might be the same. It might be the same hand. And there's more here. Bottom. I've been looking to see if there's any Latin writing, but I haven't seen any. Oh, it is. Sorry, I haven't been paying attention to the time. It is 12:31, so it's actually time to end. But thank you for letting me walk with you through these two manuscripts. I learned actually a lot getting ready for today. So thanks, and I hope this was interesting. Next week, we're going to have guest speakers. It's going to be great. So I hope to see you. Hope to see you then, and take care.